Well, I guess this was inevitable. In no way is that a slight to the audience. Listening back to that conversation with Troy, I can clearly hear the problem. You see, I start to have a thought, but then another thought swoops in and it just kind of collides and makes this horrible mess. I've already mentioned that nerves and uncertainty were, present throughout that, and I think it was evident to anyone listening to it. But that's hardly an excuse. So I'm making this follow-up video to clarify some of my points, and also because there's been some really great comments over both mine and Troy's channels. So, let's begin. First off, in no way am I attacking the MGTOW community. As I stated numerous times throughout the discussion, I believe that MGTOW is a good thing. Modern society is very hostile to most men. Young men in particular have it rough, as they are saddled with a sort of original sin and then expected to conform and preform. This pressure alone would be a burden, but is further aggravated by society yelling at them, blaming them for everything, and telling them that the things that they like are harmful and problematic. For me, this is one of MGTOW's greatest triumphs, as it showed men there was another option, another way, if you will. They could simply check out and live for themselves. Many sneer at this idea. Men living for themselves? What a backwards notion. Men should protect, men should serve, men should maintain, men should man up. MGTOW rejects all of that. Instead, it offers a form of personal protest and is the ability for an individual to find a different measure of worth, one which fulfills them and makes them happy. On reflection, one of the biggest mistakes in my first video was calling MGTOW a movement. The word movement carries with it an implication of activism. MGTOW couldn't care less about that. In its current manifestation, it is an online community of men. The other great triumph of MGTOW and the MRA is that both have torn down the mystique of women. It's sobering for a lot of men, particularly younger men, to realize that women can be vile creatures. In the West, we romanticize women far too much, making excuses and turning a blind eye to blatant double standards. MGTOW, through a process of debate, discussion, and shared life stories, has provided men with valuable insights into the minds and behavior of women. However, despite this newly gained knowledge, it's of little help when the law is so skewed against men. We hear horror story time and time again of men being often annihilated through deliberate and malicious lie. Worse, too many people turn a blind eye to the genuine suffering of men in the world. In light of this, what man of rational and sober mind would willingly enter a relationship with a woman when his entire life could be destroyed on a capricious whim? To this end, MGTOW is a sensible response. As I mentioned in the first video, I think it's a credit to MGTOW that even the most strident critics, who after they've had an honest look at the lay of the land, have to concede that MGTOW has value. However, as much as I can praise MGTOW, there are issues and problems within the community, and those need to be discussed rather than swept under the rug. The point of discussion between myself and Troy was to voice our concerns with this subset gaining dominance. It's worth remembering that at any time a philosophy can metamorphosize into an ideology, and from an ideology it can transform into a dogma. This is mine and Troy's worry, which is why we thought we would speak about it. In my discussion with Troy, there were 2 points I make, albeit poorly. These 2 points are spurned men using MGTOW as an ego boost, and the increasing similarities between MGTOW and feminism. Let me start with discussing the jaded men. If you've spent any time on the internet, you've doubtless come across the nice guy. At this point, it's practically a meme. Just type nice guy comments into a search engine and enjoy the cringe. This subgroup, who feels rejected and disillusioned, stumbles across MGTOW content. They watch a few videos, whose tone and content fetishizes the feelings of rejection these people feel. Suddenly, there is a way out, a way to push away any personal responsibility and personal accountability. Instead of owning up to any potential undesirable aspects of themselves, they can instead hide behind the veil of female nature. The parallel to this would be a Tumblr land whale insisting that the reason she's not desirable is because of the patriarchy. It's this subset within the community which myself and Troy were warning about, because these are the type of people which see MGTOW less as a personal enlightenment and philosophy and more as a device to punish women. Granted, this is a generalization. It's only a small percentage of the broad community, but it is one which is there and one which I think it would be prudent to keep an eye on. Now, if that's how they came to MGTOW, then that's not inherently a bad thing. In fact, if they can use MGTOW as a means to work through the anger and the red pill rage, all the better. A problem arises is when they lock themselves into a feedback loop of negative information which steadily becomes ingrained as a dogma in their minds. This nasty trend of the community takes a savage pleasure in the misery of women, cracking jokes about the looming walls and jabs about cats. They rub their hands with glee when menopause hits and the window to have a child has shriveled up. To be sure, some of this is just the usual ribbing which men are prone to engage in. If nothing else, it's rather cathartic, and something which is inherently male. The problem, however, is that everything is being tied back to women. Women and their existence are still linked to your own, whether it be through positive validation or through enjoying their misery. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that there isn't fun to be had. As I mentioned in the discussion with Troy, I enjoyed Human's video about women marrying themselves, and I also enjoyed some of the stories which Paul Proteus has discussed, which I shall link in the box. Nevertheless, I think the approach which Thinking Ape has is the right one. It's not that he won't comment on women, it's just that they don't really factor into his personal interests. In closing to this first statement, I suppose what I'm getting at is that there is nothing wrong with being angry or disappointed. That's perfectly normal. However, do not let this rage consume you, and do not use it as a means to ignore introspection and self-reflection. Now on to the second point. In that first video I said that MGTOW and feminism are cut from the same cloth, though they're a different fabric. So what do I mean by this? On the surface it seems like a silly statement, contentious even. The average MGTOW might argue that MGTOW has no political sway or lobbying power. To that end, they are correct. However, I'm referring to core beliefs. An aspect of feminism rejects marriage because they see it as an oppressive tool of the patriarchy. MGTOW rejects marriage because they, rightfully, see it as a deadly gamble, akin to a round of Russian roulette where the pistol is loaded with 5 bullets instead of 1. While the motivation is different, the conclusion is the same. Another aspect, which shares more than just a passing resemblance to feminism, is the claim that the opposite sex is the root of the problem. Women are the reason that society has a sickness. More often than not, MGTOW content places all the pains, ills, and sufferings of men at the feet of women. Now, to be sure, these points and grievances are not without merit. As I mentioned earlier in this video, one of the greatest feats of MGTOW and the MRA was to tear down the pedestal we place women on, providing men with tools to recognize emotional manipulation and destructive behavior. However, before I get too ahead of myself, it is also very much worth remembering that MGTOW and feminism have one key difference. At no point does MGTOW seek to smash gynocentrism. Instead, they simply opt to walk out. This is why I say MGTOW is cut from the same cloth, but is different fabric. There is an irony in feminist talking points where they say and proclaim that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. The irony, of course, being that the MGTOW version of that, a man needs a woman like a fish needs a bicycle, actually has far more merit to it. The sad fact of the matter is, at least for feminists, is that women do put a lot more stock into emotional relationships with partners and with other people, whereas men have a much greater interest in objects and hobbies and the things that make them feel useful. That actually leads me to an interesting point, because this is something that both Coltane and I think Humans touched upon, and it's also something that I agree with wholeheartedly. I have no problem with generalizations. I think it's perfectly valid to point to a trend or a repeating pattern and use them as a foundation for an argument. It should go without saying that generalization is not implied as a universal. However, as I mentioned before, when you lock yourself off into a very narrow selection of channels or a very narrow set of content or very specific kind of tailored content, whether it be because you generally feel spurned or whether because you want to reinforce yourself because you feel like you are slipping back to the siren call of women, which, you know, I've talked to some MGTOWs and that's exactly one of the reasons why they watch that kind of content. It was quite a fascinating conversation I had. However, there is a danger in that. And I should go without saying, and again, that's not exclusively a MGTOW thing, that is across all borders. Everyone can run into that trap. Absolutely everyone can fall into that trap. It's so easy in this modern age to select what we want to hear and filter out everything we don't want to hear, but it doesn't give us a balanced look on life. It gives us an incredibly skewed look. And again, this is the sort of thing that me and Troy were warning against. I guess if I could sum up my problem in this respect, it would be the simple sentence, stop stating generalizations as if they were universals. Yes, this basically boils down to the not all women are like that argument. But here's the thing, that's still a valid argument. No matter how much certain stratas within the MGTOW community want to stamp their feet and say otherwise, if it really was a case that all women were indeed like that, then you wouldn't have the likes of Karen, you wouldn't have the likes of Alison, you wouldn't have the likes of Diana Davison, Erin Pizzi, Helen Smith, and a host of others. They do exist, and they do great work for both us, for the MRA, for everybody. They help take down feminism, and they help give a lot more power. Now, just because I said that, this is not me in any way, shape, or form advocating that you should now go rushing off to the dating scene or jump into marriage. Absolutely not. Marriage is too much of a poison chalice at this point, and I wouldn't recommend any man drink from it. However, I would say, don't live your life in a state of fear and anger, as many feminists do. Because while it's not a guarantee, and while you're not entitled to it, there is still a slim chance that you might find the narwhal, and you should be open to that possibility. Now, if that really doesn't interest you, then that's fine. It's your life, and you should live it how you choose. I've read countless stories of young men who have been liberated by MGTOW. Yes, actually genuinely liberated. They've bettered themselves, not because it would attract a woman, but because it made them happy. And that is truly a great thing. You know, how many young men, even listening to this right now, might think to themselves, man, you know, I haven't got a girlfriend, I haven't got this, I haven't got the other, I'm such a loser. But again, you're measuring all of that by what society wants you to be, by what a man should be. What is a man? I made a pile of secrets. Sorry, I had to put that in there. And again, the real strength of MGTOW, the real appeal of MGTOW, is that essentially it's like that cool uncle who walks up to you and goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, cool it, champ. What's the problem?" And you're like, "Oh man, uncle, it sucks, man. You know, I haven't got a girlfriend, I've got a shit job, I've got all of this." It's like, okay, right, I get it, right? You're still young, don't worry about it, okay? That doesn't matter right now. What do you like to do? Well, you know, I like cars. Okay, cool, go and work on cars. I really like wrestling. Great, go and watch some wrestling. Train to be a wrestler. You know, live your life, do the things that make you happy, okay? And that is a great thing to take from this, and that is really, truly the greatest strength of MGTOW. And I really want that to be the take-home message from this. You know, as I mentioned in my sort of wrap-up with that conversation with Troy, is please, 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 please don't just tie yourself up into this negative hatred of women, and don't put all the blame at their feet. Yes, there are genuine grievances. Yes, there are double standards. Yes, there is a lot of reason to feel hostile. There's lots of reason to feel angry. I'm not denying any of that. You are absolutely right to feel that way. And I'm also not going to deny that there have been some men out there who have been genuinely hurt. I mean, just put for the ringer. One of the things I will be actually linking down below is the tale of Terrence Popp, the person who runs Redonkulous. Now, I like this guy's content immensely, but he's had a really, really bad time of it. And I will not even begin to deny, that there are men out there who have every reason to feel genuinely hostile and angry and hatred towards women. However, honesty compels me to also acknowledge that there are women who have been badly treated by men, and as a result, if I'm going to extend the franchise to the men who've been broken and damaged by women, then I've also got to extend that franchise to women who've been broken and damaged by men. To me, it's not really a case of who has it worse, although I would say that in today's society, yeah, men do have it worse on average. It's more of a case of acknowledging both sides have problems, and that we need to address them, rather than being divided and rather than fighting them. Now, again, this does fly in the face of MGTOW, because MGTOW has no interest in any of it. It's just like, okay, cool, whatever, bro. You do your thing, I'll do mine. See ya. Happy trails, right? Again, nothing wrong with that. For a lot of young men, if that's how you want to cope, if that's how you want to get through life, all more power to you. I'm not going to say that you're a loser. I'm not going to say that you're pathetic, that you're a woman hater, or anything of the sort, because I don't think you are. I really don't. I think anyone who is honest, who looks at the landscape, who looks at the genuine suffering of men, and looks at just how shitty things are, how easily a man could be utterly crushed and destroyed at a mere click of the fingers. Again, anyone with an honest outlook would never once accuse or say that you are being irrational for your choice. Now, there's just one last thing I want to discuss before I end this up, and that is this. When me and Troy recorded that conversation, it was the 15th of September. At that time, the last Rick and Morty episode was, I believe, Rick and Relax Session, which was rather ho-hum. It had some moments, but for the most part, it was just kind of an episode. However, since I uploaded that video, the season has now finished, and I have to concede a simple point. Yes, Season 3 has been awful. There's been maybe 3 good episodes, if that. So, what I said in that first video, where I said I was waiting and seeing, I retract that statement. I fully agree with consensus. Season 3 has been bad. Really bad. I mean, if there's not really much to say about it more than that. I mean, I was maybe thinking of making a video about that, but honestly, I think Dr. Lehman already did a great video taking that down, so I don't really feel the need to add to it. But there we go. That kind of wraps up those thoughts. Again, it's not as comprehensive as it could have been, but I want to keep this at least relatively short. So another Troy's channel made a really excellent point, which I'm now going to read in verbatim. I believe it's the name Angry Mr. Flibby. Mr. Flibby? Is it Flibby? Flibby? Yeah. Angry Mr. Flibby. And this is the comment. I think their extreme views are less to do with echo chambers, although they are a factor, and more to do with siege mentality, from feeling like they are constantly under attack. With identity politics being shoehorned into literally everything these days, I don't think a day goes by without some combination of words, straight, white, and male, being blamed for the entirety of the world's problem. Now, I think that's a perfectly reasonable, I think that's a very succinct and wonderful way of actually looking at all of this. There's no joking about it. Again, Paul Procius has touched upon this. Many MGTOW have touched upon this. They are constantly criticized by people who often don't take the time to even listen to what the core beliefs or complaints are. Worse than that, they're constantly subjected to shaming, language, and finger wagging. You know, man up, you don't get any pussy, you don't get laid, you're just an angry virgin. All these stupid, petty little labels that have absolutely no validation or speak to nothing of the concerns of the individual. So is it any wonder that most MGTOWs just immediately switch off, they hear some sort of counter thought or critical thought that they would immediately just say, yeah, whatever, I probably heard this before. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't some validation in that, but again, it's still dangerous to get into that mindset. As I've stated, and hopefully as this video has proven, it is not my goal in any way to shame you guys. Okay? I believe, as I said, MGTOW is a force for good. It's a philosophy which has enriched many men's lives and helped them deal with a hostile world. Nevertheless, the community should be vigilant and ensure it isn't tainted. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that's cleared a few things up. On the next Strange World, Troy and I will be discussing video games and narrative. I hope you join us. Take care and all the best. Cheers.